Welcome to the subject software engineering. At present, we are studying the chapter requirement engineering process, and the topic is requirement discovery. Yesterday, we have finished the viewpoints as far as requirements discovery is concerned, and today we will take next technique of requirement discovery, that is interviewing. So students, as you know, interviews are of two types, that is formal or informal interviews. So point number 1, formal or informal interviews with the system stakeholders are part of most engineering process. So in the development of a system, interview, whether it could be formal or informal, is very important. Point number 2, in these interviews, the requirement engineering team puts questions to the stakeholders about the system they use and the system to be developed. So students, in the interview, the requirement engineering team, which is working on collecting the information, puts number of questions to the stakeholders about the present working system and the new system that they will be developing. Point number 3, requirements are derived from the answers to these questions. So we'll take up interviewing. Interviews may be of two types. One, closed interview, and second, open interview. As the name suggests, closed interview, here stakeholders answer a predefined set of questions. So students, in the closed interview, there is a ready-made questionnaire which the stakeholders have to answer. Point number 2, open interview. Here, there is no predefined agenda. The requirements engineering team explores a range of issues with the system stakeholders and hence develops better understanding of their needs. So students, in the open interview, there is no questionnaire, fixed questionnaire as in case of closed interview. Here, the requirement engineering team discusses all the issues with the stakeholders and understand what they need. But in practice, interviews with stakeholders are normally mix of these. So students, there is no perfect closed interview or open interview. It is always best mix of these two concepts. Point number 4, interviews are good for getting an overall understanding of what stakeholders do. So in the interview, we will get complete information about what are the activities carried out by stakeholder, because there is one-to-one interaction. Stakeholder can openly speak to the developing team. Point number 5, how they interact with the system and difficulties that they face with the current system. So in this interview, the stakeholders discuss how they interact with the system and what are the difficulties they come across. 6th, people like talking about their work and are usually happy to get involved in the interview. So we will know what is effective interview. So students, effective interviews have two characteristics. One, that is the first characteristics, they are open-minded, avoid preconceived ideas about the requirements and are willing to listen to the stakeholders and if needed, ready to change their mind. So students, the effective interview should be with open mind. There should not be preconceived ideas about the requirements. And in this open-minded people should listen to the stakeholders, and if it is important, they can change their thought. Point number 2, they prompt the interviewee to start discussion with a question, a requirement proposal, or suggesting working together on a prototype system. So effective interview, here the stakeholders must feel comfortable. Okay, they will not open up unless you give them free hand. So here you put a simple question to them, or give a proposal, or ask them to work together on a prototype system. Students, but there are limitations of interviewing. It is hard to elicit domain knowledge in the interviewing technique because of the reason 1, all application specialists use terminology and jargon that is specific to domain and is less meaningful to others. So students, when the developing team is working on the system, necessarily they have to use these technical terms. Okay, so many times these technical terms may not mean anything to the novice stakeholders. So this is one of the limitation of the interviewing. The second limitation is point number 2, some domain knowledge is so familiar to the stakeholders that they either find it difficult to explain, or they think it is so fundamental that it is not worth mentioning. So second limitation is that, okay, the stakeholders are always good in the domain knowledge. They will feel that the system developers knows how the system should be developed. So they will not part away with the knowledge thinking that the team developing the software knows everything. Limitations of interviews are not effective techniques for eliciting knowledge about organizational requirements and constraints because 1, there are subtle power and influence relationship between stakeholders in the organization. So students, very well you know, in an organization there are different people working at different levels. They have got different power structure. They have got different influencing relationship. So many times the people would not open up because of the power and influence relationship that is present in the organization. They are not ready to speak openly. So point number 2, published organizational structures rarely match the reality of decision making in an organization. So students, you know, there is organizational chart where there are people working in the hierarchy. Okay, the chart is ready, but many times in the practice this hierarchy may not be followed. So this is one more stumbling block in case of interview. So students, we have discussed much about the interview, and the next point, information from interviews supplement other information about the system from documents and user observation. So this point states that information from the interview is not total, whereas interviews will only supplement or support the information that the developing team gets from documents and user observation. So students, we have studied the topic interviewing here in the topic eliciting, okay, discord. So we'll stop here. Okay, I'll be sending this PDF notes to you. Okay, hope you study well. Thank you.